Welcome to Mixternal Messaging. I'm your host, Cynthia Hayes, and today I'm joined by my guest, Ann Reiling. She is the founder and advisor of Konclarity. Ann, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell the people all about you, Ann. What do you love to do? What do you geek out about? What do you enjoy? What's your story?
It's a long story, but I'll keep it short for today. So essentially, I love working with people and I love helping people figure out what it is that gets them excited, where their confidence, how to tell their story. My first role in life was as a bartender. Then I went on to be an executive recruiter and then in marketing. And all throughout, what I figured out is that I help people figure out their stories and tell their stories and connect with their stories. And so an interesting kind of thread that ties through all of those pieces. And I'm really excited to have the chance to do that all the time now.
It's a gift. Yes. So you recently founded your own company, which is so exciting. Tell us a little bit about that. And then I'm going to pepper you with a bunch of questions.
Absolutely. So I stepped out of corporate America last year and took a break. And in that break, I found a lot of clarity and I've connected with a lot of people in my world and I've kind of found some confidence that I think I had lost at some point. And, as I was thinking about entering back into the corporate world, I think what I realized is that I really enjoy having an opportunity to go in and work with people one-on-one and work with leaders. And I'm in this very exploratory part of my career. And so the company is born out of a place where I get a chance to work with people and help them find that same kind of clarity and connection and confidence in a world that seemingly is faster paced and higher demands and more expectations on all of us, and helping people kind of get what it is that they want out of their business, get what it is that they want out of their career, get what it is that they want out of their life or their team. And it's been an absolute joy. And I love it every day.
What a gift. Helping someone unpack their story and tell their story well and have it like thread through all the things that they're doing for their clients, for their team members, for themselves. That's no easy task. And a lot of people don't even realize they should take the time to even consider all the things that go into that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think so much of it is the time, right? And especially in this fast-paced world where there's so many deliverables and, you're sitting on Zoom all day and then you got to grab the kids and then you're doing this, who's really making that time to carve out that time to say, what is my story and why is that important? Because it doesn't feel like it has this immediate ROI, right? What is it doing for me right now? Well, the reality of it is that it takes a little bit of time and it takes real time, the same way that you go to the gym, is the same thing that you have to do to find your story. And so I think that working with someone like me allows people to kind of carve that time out and hold themselves accountable. And I think it's once they start to see that it's all there, right? The story's there. Right. They just have to take a little bit of time to listen to it and to ask and to be curious. And as that all starts to come together, right, you start to see people make more time for it, right? And then they don't need me as much, and they can kind of lean into it. And so that's the really exciting part, right? Is I'm not writing anyone's story for them. I'm just helping them figure out that they're the main character, right? And what they want that main character to kind of look like and own and hold. And so, yeah.
Right. Really drawing that out of someone when they haven't really considered it. They're focused on their mission or whatever, but they haven't found a way to articulate it well or have it, carry out.
Or they're focused on their villain story, right? They're
tell me about that.
I don't have this, or I didn't do that, or I can't. I talked to a woman the other day and she was like, I don't have a college degree. And it's like, okay, but you have 20 years of experience growing and developing and crushing it. So why are we focused? Why is that a negative part of your story instead of, hey, I don't have this and I was able to go on and do all these amazing things, right? And so it's not taking it out of your story, it's just changing it. And I think sometimes people kind of focus on the bad guy.
Yeah. Sometimes what's driving you internally doesn't need to be your external messaging.
Yes, fair, right? Or you find a way to kind of capture it, right?
Yeah, articulate it in a way that resonates better with your audience because they're not necessarily going to resonate with what you do. Okay, very cool. So one really fun project, the way you and I met was we were working through this MVV, Mission Vision Values project together. And I learned a lot from you, with you, as we walked through this together. I'm super passionate about it. I learned you're super passionate about it. Making sure that internal messaging, the core values, and the mission that a company says they hold true is actually what employees experience, and it's how teams relate to external clients, and it is the experience anyone would have with the brand externally. Unpacking all of that, that's what this whole podcast is about in all these different lanes. I'd love to hear some of your perspective on, like, let's start 30,000 feet up. Like, why does a mission, vision, values even matter? What does it matter to an organization?
Yeah, it's the best place to start. And I think ultimately I didn't have an answer for that before I was in a role to say, hey, we're going to do this, right? So I had a leader. I was in a new role, and I had a leader who came to me and said, this is important and we're going to do it and you're going to help me do it. And I said, okay, I don't know what you're talking about, but we'll figure it out, right? And we'll learn as we go. And I think what fundamentally became so clear to me is that was really coming from the leadership. And so it was something that, the mission, vision, values was something that I think had existed, right? It was there. But nobody could say what it was. Nobody could share it externally. We weren't necessarily getting the most out of it. And so it wasn't creating something. It wasn't saying, oh, we're going to be this completely different company. It was taking an authentic look at who we are as an organization and putting some structure and some kind of guidance around it. And all of a sudden, it becomes something that really becomes the connective tissue, right? Which is essentially what I think sometimes people feel when they can't describe a culture or they don't really know. It's because you're missing that connective tissue. And to me, that the MVV is the thing that really brought 7 lines of businesses together, and it brought leaders and kind of new people together and veterans, and like everybody within the organization was really able to kind of connect on these core pieces.
I love what you said around, it was already like what came out of it, the core values and the mission, all of those elements were already there. Like, it's already an authentic part of the company. I think that's like so important, that you're not trying to be like, oh, but we want to be this. Like, there's this aspirational element to it. And you're like, no.
Yeah, well, and you can want to be it more or want to be it better, right? But at the end of the day, like, especially when we were looking at our values, like at the time, I think it was honorable, inclusive, collaborative, driven, and innovative. These were all things that the company was doing, right? It's not like we were like, oh man, nobody around here is selling, so like we should really focus on driven as a value. Like, no, we hired driven people. We just hadn't put a point on it. And we didn't say competitive, right? Because we didn't want it to be competitive. We wanted it to be driven. And so, really, it's amazing how much time you can spend with a room full of people, arguing and kind of talking and collaborating over the nuances of some of these words and what do they really mean and why do we want to choose that one? But they're there. It's just really kind of giving them the legs that they need to enable your external messaging, to attract your the employee proposition was huge. I mean, we did a ton of work with our recruiting partners because people understood, externally, like who they were going to be when they showed up to work at the company.
It's really amazing, like you're alluding to, the conversations that have to happen in the background. I don't think a lot of people realize how much work is involved in that. Like, how do you even choose which people you're asking? Because you don't necessarily need to ask everyone in the company. So like, where do you even start with that?
Yeah, well, so and I think that there's, again, it's mission, vision, values, it's authentic. So there isn't like a one size fits all, right? Like, there is an element of understanding your culture and understanding, your people. But I think there is fundamentally, right, that leadership level has to be there, and they have to like really be engaged. This is not an exercise where you can kind of write it off. And I think, where you can really start to engage people within your employee population is surveys and roundtables. And so you're not exactly saying like, what do you think our values should be, right? Because it's asking really interesting questions and having conversations and hearing them talk. And so you pull in groups of people, you pull in your high performers, you pull in your brand new people, you pull in someone who's been with the organization for 30 years, right? Because all these people are looking at your organization from a different standpoint. Yeah. And I think, one of the places too that people don't necessarily think to talk to is your customers and your clients, right? Like, how do we show up when you think of us? What do we do differently than our competition, and what has been your experience? And because that's reality, and that's great feedback. So you got to be ready to hear some good and hear some bad, and think about what that improvement is. But it's a lot of different people, and it's not asking them exactly what they want, right? Like this, right. That's not the quest is not what do you think our MVV should be. The quest is,
who are we? Who do you say we are?
Yeah. What makes you excited to be here? And what do you think we need to work on? And what do you think is different from the other organizations that you've been a part of? And so there's a lot of curiosity there.
That's nice. One more question, and then we're going to take a little break.
Yeah.
So you get all the feedback. You kind of start to refine, I guess is the next step. Like, okay, so I'm consolidating all this feedback. I'm understanding who we are. We're really wrestling over like coming down to that word driven versus competitive, those sorts of elements. Like, then what? How do you launch this into the world? How do you communicate this? What does that process look like?
The launch, right? Yeah, because everybody in your company just gets so excited when corporate says, hey, we have a big initiative, right? Cue the eye roll. But I think that the launch, right, it's so important for two reasons. Where one, it's really an opportunity to like bring that community together, right? And I think that there is excitement there. And it's like, even if you have people that aren't going to be excited, like, as in our situation, I was in head of marketing, but I think that, this comes from different places within the organization. But having that excitement and having different people who you've pulled in and really kind of telling that story of this isn't just our MVV, this is how we got here. This is why we got here, and this is what we're going to do for the next 6 months, for the next 12 months, for the next 24 months, right? Like, show that this is not a email, this isn't a town hall. We're all going to send you this, and then we're never going to talk about it.
One and done, just a little flash.
Yeah. There's not, you can't say it once and be done. And and I think we found that over time, right, people started kind of engaging with it, and it's like, oh, here we go, it's coming back. Oh, it's in this PowerPoint presentation. Oh, we're talking about it in this panel. Oh, it came up in my review, right? Or we start to, as a, onboarding. So it's really become something that, again, it weaves into the fabric. And that launch isn't just here, you all need to hear this, believe it, and go out and evangelize. It's hear this, understand it, and take some time to try it on and figure it out, and let's learn it, right? Let's talk about what driven is. Let's talk about what collaborative is, right. And how do you show up that way? And how do you show up that way internally? And how do you show up that way externally, right? What does that mean to be collaborative with your colleagues? And what does it mean to be collaborative with your clients? And what does it mean to be innovative as a manager of your team? And what does it mean to be innovative as a manager of business, and how do you show up in that capacity? So I think the launch is crucial, and I think a lot of people kind of do the launch and then I shouldn't say a lot of people, I don't know that, but I think people do. I think it is easy to do the launch and then you get distracted, right? Yes. Then it's the next a best
Next
intention.
initiative.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's the next quarter, it's the next fiscal year, it's the next project, it's the next investment, and it's easy to let it kind of fall unintentionally. And so, really driving that intention is huge.
That's great. That's great. I do want to dig in when we get back to how you reinforce the messaging. We've started to talk about that, but that is like, we don't want it to die off post-launch. So we'll dig into that and some more topics a little more. I'm your host, Cynthia Hayes. This is Mixternal Messaging, and I'll be right back with my guest, Ann Reiling, in just a minute.
Mixternal Messaging, Marcom that Roars, is brought to you by Liger. Tired of your brand message being a whimper instead of a roar? Mixternal Messaging cracks the code on the secret weapon of B2B success, uniting your internal and external brand narrative. We're taking deep dives into the challenges and strategies to craft a message that resonates, both inside your company and with your clients. No fluff, no theory, just real stories and actionable insights from the trenches. We'll be interviewing marketing and communication rock stars, hearing their triumphs and struggles in the world of mixternal messaging, across industries from tech to healthcare. Ready to make your brand roar? Tune in to Mixternal Messaging, Marcom that Roars, a Liger podcast. For more information, visit ligerpartners.com and follow us on our social media.
Welcome back to Mixternal Messaging. I'm your host, Cynthia Hayes, and today I'm joined by my esteemed guest, Ann Reiling. She's the founder and advisor of Konclarity. Ann, we are digging into MVV and what that means, mission, vision, values, how it relates internally and externally. We've talked about launching. We don't want it to die off post-launch. So how do we effectively reinforce mission, vision, values ongoing? That sounds a little daunting and exhausting. But how have you made that a successful reinforcement? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that there's a huge element of planning here, right? Like the reinforcement is not something that you're like, okay, what are we going to do to reinforce tomorrow? Right. But it's really sitting down at the beginning of the launch and saying, what is this reinforcement going to look like? Let's make this easier on ourselves. Let's understand what the next 6 months looks like. And I think, and it's breaking it down piece by piece, right? It's really understanding, okay, today we're going to talk about the mission, right? And this month we're going to focus on the mission, and you're going to see the mission talked about in your team meetings. You're going to see the mission coming through in email correspondence. We might have an opportunity for you to engage in the mission. There might be a roundtable. There might be an external speaker. There's going to be something that kind of ties you to the understanding of that mission and then where we came from. We're not going to ask you what the 5 values are or the 4 values, right? Yes. One at a time. Yes. You're going to have the card there, but it's kind of trickling out, over that time. For us, it was 5 or 6 or 7 months, right? Because it made sense. We kind of focused on a core value each month. Really had time to engage. There were opportunities for the staff to engage with each other and to talk about collaborative and to interview someone else in their group and ask more questions and understand, a collaborative activity to support the idea of collaborative, right? A driven activity to support the idea of driven, right? So it might be a contest. And those kind of monthly places, you're not going to get every single person involved in every single activity. You'd love to, but it isn't going to happen.
Not realistic.
And so find different ways to engage people along the way. And I think, clearly I was in a sales organization. I think this was a huge opportunity. The rollout was a huge opportunity to really bring our corporate and our sales teams together in really meaningful ways that I don't think had happened.
That was really fun to watch. I love how you orchestrated. So one of the smart things you guys did was picking the influencers internally, and they may have been people with formal authority, or they may have just been the unofficial mayor of this, kind of this region or whatever. And then finding people in different types of roles, operations, sales, whatever. It didn't, you spread the love throughout You found the people who you knew you could count on to really embody those core values or that mission, and to relay it in a way you could trust them to do that in these smaller groups. And then they were carrying it out. So it's this exponential impact rather than just coming down from the top. And now we're saying, this is what you need to be. It's like, no, hey, friend that I work with all the time, or new friend that I'm meeting, my peer, we're already doing this, but here's what it looks like to be really intentional about it and how we can up our game. Like those conversations were really exciting.
It's absolutely. And I think we saw it, you at first it's a little awkward, and then over time, right, people start to expect it and start to understand it. And we took it one step further than the 6 months. And so our mission was, we positively impact businesses and careers one conversation at a time.
You still remember it. Look at that.
Of course. It's like, it's my core. And, we went on from that. And so 6 months later, we were doing, past the kind of the 6 month launch, we were doing these great panels where we were bringing together people to talk about really hard issues, right? We were talking about race. We were talking about sexuality. We were talking about mental health. We were talking about all these things that had traditionally, at the end of the day, it's not a training, right? It's not necessarily making you better at your job. It's not helping you hit your sales goals, but it's helping you really understand who are the people that you're talking to, and how these conversations that were really honest and were coming from, whether it was the CFO or someone who had just started, it was this really wonderful kind of collaboration and connection of people who were able to sit down and talk. And, the chats would be going, and people would be, this is great, and and they're engaging. And so it was just, I think it's the authenticity of, if that's not your mission, then that's probably not the right activity, right? But for us, it really connected with what we were trying to voice internally.
Yes. Yeah, and your employees feel it, because employees will call you out if what you're promising, like externally, or what you say are your core values or your mission. If they're not experiencing that, they're going to raise a hand. They're going to let someone know that there's a disconnect there.
Or, right, in this world, or they're going to shut down, right? Yeah. And that's what we see is that, right? They're either too loud or they're not loud, right? What's more dangerous, like the toddler you can hear or the toddler you can't hear? And
the one you can't, they definitely have scissors in their hand.
Yeah, exactly. They're getting into something, right? And I think that this is like, if it's just on the walls, right? If you just paint it on the walls and you just kind of have these empty kind of, this is us, but it doesn't match your actions, and it doesn't match, what people feel and see internally or externally,
falls flat. Yeah, it does. And then you end up,
it starts to work as a negative. You'd be better off not having.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And not saying like, hey, this is important, because at least it's not empty.
Yes. So as it translates externally, how do you see MVVs? Like, do they matter externally? What does that translation look like to a client?
Again, I think that it matters externally if it's real and if it's authentic, because I think it makes it a lot easier for your internal people to share the message, right? And that's ultimately what it comes down to, is people will do things if they're easy. And if that messaging is really easy, it allows them to figure out, how do I take this and how do I make this my own? And then it is more likely that your external customers are getting consistency. And so what we found, having 7 different lines of business, right, that all had their own, they're similar, right? It's not like these 7 lines of business were doing anything crazy different, but they were all a little bit different. And we had historically had a hard time kind of connecting, right? And getting to see things kind of move back and forth. Well, we did these activities, and the messaging started to tighten up, and it became clearer, and you saw a huge increase in cross-selling, right? And you saw a huge increase in our salespeople being able to talk about the business as a whole and the value as a whole, and not just my part or what I know. And so I think, right, bottom line, we made more money, right? So like, who doesn't love that ROI?
There's got to be
right?
a return, for all that
There was
investment.
actually like a real, return. We saw the productivity go up. I think outside of that, and I had mentioned it briefly, the partnership that I had with our HR team and our recruiting team specifically, the recruiting manager glommed onto all of this and was like, yes, right, we can really work with this, and created such a clean external experience for people who are coming in touch with the brand, that even if they didn't join us, right, like even if they didn't come to the company, they knew who we were, they knew what we stood for, they knew that they wanted to be a part of it. And I feel like that just, we were able to attract versus find, right? We didn't have to look so hard for people, because people were like, who's that?
They were curious and wanted to get to know.
Company. Yeah, like this sounds really, really thoughtful and really well, well positioned, and like a company I want to be a part of. Now, if those values aren't your values and you don't necessarily care about being honorable or innovative, then maybe Lucas, at the time wasn't the right place for you.
They knew that right away, which is also a win. It's like, either we're aligned or we're not, but at least you know that from the get-go, and there's no surprises. There's no bait and switch, right?
You know what you're getting into. So I think that there's absolutely this, your customers are external, and I think they had there was just a more consistent, clean, clear message.
Where trust is built all around, because there's consistency there, and everyone knows what they're getting externally and internally, which is great. So now you've pivoted. You've launched your own company, Konclarity. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So tell me about the mission and purpose of Konclarity. What are you aiming to achieve?
Yeah, so ultimately, the drumbeat is clarity, connection, and confidence, right? And I really look at that in two ways that I want to make an impact in people's lives. And one, having had 15 plus years in the executive search space, is really working with individuals. Before, this isn't about switching jobs, right? It's not about writing resumes. It's not about interview tips. It's about finding that person's story and finding their confidence, and coming up with the people in their network who are strategic and meaningful and will help them move through whatever the next phase is. And so I'm doing kind of handfuls of one-on-one individual clients and career coaching. I think I'm still trying to figure out, like, am I a coach? Am I an advisor? And am I this? So I'm figuring it out.
The answer is yes.
I'm working on my own story while I'm helping other people work on theirs. And then it's working with small business. I have absolute love of small business, and I love watching leaders and leadership teams who want to be better and don't fully understand how. And my time, at Lucas Group, where I was in a marketing, communication, sales enablement role, as much as I was doing into the marketing, I was really thinking about how do we create better communication, better utilization of our people and our processes in the C-suite. And I think that was fundamentally what made me successful, was not my interest in hitting my own goals, but my ability to help us reach our goals together, right? And so being able to have the chance to work with small companies to help them think about, where do they want to grow? What's keeping them from getting there? Do they have the right people in the right place? Are their teams clear on what they're doing? Do we need to rethink through some of these strategies, and then helping them tell their story, right? And figure out what they want that to look like and what they want that to be. So I'll get it shorter and more condensed over time, but
but for now, that's where you're finding your sweet spot, which is great.
Yeah.
And then it always evolves, and every company, no matter how large or small, their story evolves as they, get deeper into things, and as the marketplace evolves and needs change. But what a beautiful thing to bring that level of expertise from your larger, huge perspective to a small business who wouldn't normally have access to that kind of advisory.
Yeah, and my first company was 10 people, and my second company was 400, and my third company was 10,000, right? So I've seen, some of the differences in how companies kind of structure things, and the good and the bad. And, and I think it's really, it's exciting to be able to share some of that insight and to help people think through what are the resources that are available to them, and what are some different directions that they can go in. So it's been really rewarding.
That's great. Congratulations, Ann. So we're going to wrap up before we go. Liger, our tagline is to be known. We want to be known for saving the world from boring, broken marketing. And we want our clients to be known for all the right reasons and all the right places at the right time for all the things they're doing. What do you want to be known for?
Well, obviously the color pink.
Obviously.
Yes. There's nothing else. If you think of nothing else, think pink when you think of Ann, at least for now. We'll see how long the pink phase stands. But ultimately, I want to be known for helping people find clarity, connection, and confidence. At the end of the day, that's what really gets me excited. And I think that, I want to be known for how I make people feel and kind of go through their day. And so it's going to show up in some different ways, but I'm pretty excited about it.
That's awesome. I love it. Thank you, Ann. This has been Mixternal Messaging. I'm your host, Cynthia Hayes. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.